Okay, so welcome back to Yoga Beyond the Mat. This is our daily radio show, and we are unpacking Simon Haas's book, Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul. So many of you have digital copies, so that's really good to see. We are on the chapter called The Story and the Storyteller. Just to do a quick recap, some of you missed the session on how fear, anxiety, grief, many other things surface. And what does that really mean when it comes to suffering? You know, how the Gita describes suffering as lamentation of the past or remorse, let's say, or fear of the future, or being confused in the present. So that is what is real suffering. What happens to us is not, that's just the stimulus, but what we carry with us in our heads, which is lamentation, fear, and confusion, really stops us to live our true dharma. And that's something which often is overlooked in the rush of reading the Gita, and that's something very critical to understand. So I'll share my screen with a slide deck, and we'll try to unpack it a little bit more. Okay, this was the previous slide, but I'm going back to. So yes, it all starts at an emotional level. We have fear, anxiety. Typically, our feelings are dread, and we have all kinds of racing thoughts about the worst case scenario that might play out. We also have catastrophic fantasies. In this age of nuclear warfare, almost kind of talked about as if it's going to happen. It's really hard for us to deal with it. And we immediately see that manifestation in our body, the tension. Our breathing starts moving from the nose regularly to something that we do heavily with our mouth. So it's really something, the fear is not just a thing in the head, but it kind of manifests in our being. And if it's not dealt with, then it can also manifest as anger, outbursts, or even withdrawal. Same with grief. Obviously, the immediate thing could be tears. When we miss people who we've lost, it's a lot of heaviness in our heart that we carry. So same with confusion, same with shame, guilt, anger, resentment. So this particular slide, which I'm sharing now, will give you a kind of a small list of how typical feelings and thoughts manifest in our being when we have these emotional outbursts. The feeling of hopelessness is what obviously it ends with. And in our next chapter, which we won't do today, we'll talk about the 4 stages of how the 4 signs of the dark night of the soul. So more like symptoms. So these are more symptoms of the dark night or the loss of meaning that we feel in our lives. So if we have any of these symptoms in our lives right now, we are already kind of dealing with our own battles. There is a battle which we are ignoring, or in a battle that we really don't label. So when we go to a psychologist, this is label your emotions. There's a name. So feel, deal, and heal is the mantra that you're taught. You have to feel your emotions, label them, identify the root cause analysis, and only then can you sort of start putting attention to it. And with intention, you can try to solve it. So this is a sign that we are going through a dark night of the soul. So all of us are, I think, in some stage or the other. It's very hard to say that we are not. At any given moment, I feel we are going through some of these emotions, and we just let them be. So the Gita is giving us a wake-up call, because if we don't deal with them, feel them, deal with them, and then heal them, and how healing happens is very interesting in the Gita. Krishna gives several paths to Arjun to deal with suffering. and to rise above, transcend suffering. But there's one path which is what Arjun really wants eventually, because he feels that the others are not going to work for him. So then Krishna gives him the most profound secret of living life. And I won't give it away right now, but I just say it's Bhakti Yoga. And there's Karma Yoga is something which he defines. There's Dhyan Yoga, which is more, culmination of, say, Ashtanga Yoga, or even Gyan Yoga, which is acquiring knowledge about, who we are, why we exist, what is this body made up of, where are we going, many of those things. But Krishna also says that all of these are important to know. It's not just blind faith and devotion that will get you to true devotion, but your knowledge should lead you to bhakti. Your Ashtanga Yoga, which is on the mat, should lead you to bhakti. Your Karma Yoga, your duties, worldly duties in the world, and how you do them should also lead you to bhakti. So eventually, it's basically showing that Bhakti Yoga is an elevator you can take. And if you practice that, that even your Dhyan and Gyan and Karma, which is worldly duties, even your Ashtanga Yoga practice, and even your knowledge, you want to understand the world around you and yourself through knowledge, will also become easy, much more easier. So it's like taking an elevator up a multi-storied building instead of climbing all the stairs. So that's what Srila Prabhupada in his purports also highlighted very often. So this was just a segue into what we've tried to understand about dealing with fear, lamentation, and confusion. Today's topic is a continuation of the discussion, the story and the storyteller. And Simon Haas, he kind of has a very interesting way to talk about situations. So he linked his experience of observing what people he knew in school at a reunion were expressing. And he, as an observer, was able to see that, okay, maybe I'm out of this movie. There's a movie going on. There are these characters. They all have their, script, and they're trying to defend their script. They're being very cautious to really stay true to the script. But he's kind of getting detached from that gathering of friends, old friends, school friends. And now he feels our acquaintances, they're no longer really close to him anymore. So he's kind of getting detached. And what he observes is, a lot of people are dealing with societal expectations. Some of them are not able to even express what true friendship is, or, how they find people not so pleasant anymore, people who probably they knew. Even digital anxiety, like how, keeping up with appearances on social media is affecting so many people. He talks about I making, the ahankara concept. All of this, when we see that our story is challenged, if we cling on to it too much, it leads to many things. It could lead to, making us sad in some ways, but it also can limit our growth. I think that's really crucial, because if we only see ourselves from certain identities, we don't really give space enough to grow. We also compare, contrast, and compete, because we feel that that identity that we've created for ourselves is the only thing we want to defend. And if by chance that goes away, a job loss or whatever, or a familial role that you might have suddenly might be taken away, it changes things. And all of this brings fear. Any change of failure can really be disturbing. So, in short, we also miss the deeper spiritual challenge that we have in this body. And to grow, We need to ask existential questions and sort of lead a life which would be something that would lead us to true bhakti and happiness. So, very quickly, I'll move to our different identities. And this is the crux of today's discussion. So, I'll just want you to talk about it more than I do. Uh, so, what happens when you cling to a certain identity? So, Celia, Nicole, you obviously have a professional identity now. Like you've been like a social worker in a space. So, one of you is an engineer. The other one, I believe, is something to do with environmental science or international affairs. International affairs, right? Yeah. So, is your worth tied to this whole idea of being a social welfare worker? Do you think, why have you chosen this profession? And do you think, what sense of worth do you get from being a social worker? Go ahead. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, no, sorry, because we are hearing you very badly, so I was trying to understand.
Yes, there's a
the
little bit of
question.
noise in the street.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So you can come back to it, but I'll move on to the next identity that we have for us. You also have a body image identity, right? Like as youngsters, we might feel that uh, that person is fat, I am skinny, I'm not fit, that person is pretty. So uh, how I look determines how lovable or respectable I am. Like, that kind of helps understand the false narrative that we create around body image. So what's the trap? The trap is that we obsess about appearances, and eventually if we don't feel good about our appearance, there's a low self-worth. And once we have a certain view that people should dress like this or be like this, then we start judging others because we want everyone to be similar in a certain way. So it's again linked to diversity and inclusion in some ways, understanding that. We also have family roles as a daughter, as a sister, as a niece or a aunt or whatever else. Um, Family roles could be also defined in terms of the work that you do for, say, a aging elderly family member. Are you a caregiver? So what is the false narrative in the family, right? So suppose you become a parent and you have a child and you've spent 14 years given up your job, like one of the characters in the book. Later on in the next chapter, there's Heather. Simon goes and meets Heather, and it's a very interesting chapter to understand identities. And she's going through that breakdown. She thought she was this perfect wife and raised perfect kids, um, left her job to do all of that. And then when she suffers a setback when it comes to a divorce or husband walking away, it's a complete breakdown for her. So in her head, she was probably thinking, I exist to fulfill this role as a mother or a wife. And if I meet all these expectations of my husband, my children, or what I feel is good for the children if I provide them, that is what is going to fulfill me. So that's the false narrative. And she was limiting her identity to just that. So the trap is you might suppress your own needs or even individuality or even growth to maintain harmony or live up to others' projections of you. So based on other people's expectations, you start living life. So these are different roles we have, and these are in a way temporary because professionally we can lose our job, our body image changes with illness or with age or whatever, eating habits. um, Family roles do change. from an infant to a child to a student to whatever, caregiver in the end to our parents and many other things. Then there's class-based sort of identification. I'm rich, that person is middle class, or uh, I don't relate to people who are poor. Um, I'm self-made. So these are various ways we look at our own place in the world when it comes to just definitions of wealth, which is so relative, so temporary. Then we have social labels. That person is introverted, I'm extroverted, she's a rebel, that person dropped out of college, that person's a cheater. So we have these labels, a slacker, so that person is a nerd, uh, that person has this victim label on him all the time. Uh, in some sense, society is very judging and it labels people. And but as a individual, you have to see whether is that is that who you feel you are, or is that really affecting you negatively, the social labels. So yeah, my daughter came back one day and said that some group of kids consider herself to be weird and they keep calling her that, and they group together and they say that, and so she's getting affected by labels society is putting on her. So it's a trap. So these social labels can become self-fulfilling prophecies also. You start internalizing them, like, oh, people are saying I'm weird, they're consistently saying I'm weird. So they keep you in a behavioral pattern that no longer serves your growth because you are overly kind of thinking about what others say about you. So there are many more. We can go on and on. Of course, nation, there is a huge discussion on how and why nations and individuals who identify with certain nations or ethnicity and politics are just can't see eye to eye with someone else. And that's really not good for the world. So I'll stop here, take in some reflections and questions. This also segues very well into the next chapter, the four signs of a dark night. And eventually, we'll move on to chapter 3, the blind emperor, the invisible dark night of the soul. Okay, reflections and questions. Priti, you have any?
Yeah, I was just looking at the slide. So, yeah, these body image and this your conception of relating to the body is very, very strong. Even after you've read a little and you're aware, still you become very bodily conscious most of the time, and it's very difficult to get from the body to the spirit. And repeated reading and repeated listening to classes like this will actually help us.
Thank you. That's a profound realization and an action step for all of us. Yes, final thoughts, Celia, Nicole?
Okay. Well, reading also about these fields that we put here in the screen. Um, my question is, because I mean, if you read in the book, like it calls what happens in the Gita, but also in the next chapter that well we read, but okay, you also mentioned it. These characters are having personal crises. Um, but what about what if the crisis is not purely personal, especially in our today's society, but it's also collective, it's also systematic. Because most of the time, like it's not just something that is going inside of you, but it's related to all kind of external factors. So what about people that are having these crises, but because they are in situations of oppressions, of toxic families, of wars. I don't know.
Yes.
Like how in that situation you can transform pain in a, like, the transformative power that the author says it has, because it's, I don't know, very difficult. Yes.
It's a wonderful question, and I think Simon hints on this. He doesn't really elaborate much on page 37. Whenever we find ourselves caught up in fear, anger, jealousy, or frustration, we've fallen victim to delusion of the false self. Now, this can happen even collectively. And then he says in his next paragraph, not only individuals possess stories, but entire communities and nations create and promote them too. As they construct false shared identities, religion may do the same, propagating narratives that unite or divide. When those collective stories clash, it leads to conflict and war. So, yeah, it's clear there. When these collective stories clash, it leads to conflicts and wars. So, what happens when events challenge our stories so profoundly that we can no longer hold on to it? What happens if our story collapses? We are propelled into deep darkness and despair. So pain happens after, this whole clinging reaches a point where there's conflict. We judge others, we compete with others, we forget even basic human values to deal with others. So it limits our growth, definitely, not just spiritually, but also collectively as a nation or whatever group that you want to link to. So if someone is wise, someone who's leading this, say, country or the world, and unfortunately, we are in the age of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is also called the age of Kali, which is quarrel. We quarrel at very small things. We don't see the big picture. So if our identities are challenged, we start quarreling and maybe even start a war. So if we were living in Vedic times, everyone had this basic knowledge that we are not this temporary body and mind, we are the soul, and our goal is to selflessly serve uninterruptedly, sort of keep doing that based on our own swabhav and our own nature, so that we know that this world that we are in is real. It's not as if this world doesn't exist. Like in some philosophies like Buddhism or others, they say nothing exists, your present moment is what exists, right? It's an interesting simplistic form, but in Vedic Vedanta, it kind of says everything is real. You can feel everything, right? You feel pain, right? You can feel the dirt in the air. You can smell things. So how can you say it's unreal? However, we need to rise above this, and I think the Gita helps us deal with collective pain in a much more, let's say, wise and erudite way, which makes a lot more sense than some limited philosophies that we have inherited. So you're privy to probably the most secret spiritual science to live at the soul level. Like I said, the soul has four essential qualities, which is Sat, Chit, Anand, and Tapa. And if you, the next book that we'll actually do is called The Book of Dharma. It is also written by Simon Haas. And he really goes deep into all these four qualities of the soul, which is truth, purity, non-violence, and discipline. So it gives us a complete blueprint on how to make enlightened decisions. So individually, and then hopefully attract people to who are similar minded. And so at least your life and your circle of influence will keep growing to have a society which is peaceful with oneself. Of course, there will be conflict, but it will be based on dharma. Like, you'll be able to protect dharma. Okay, makes sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining today. See you tomorrow.